We are on the record in Manistee, Michigan for the video deposition of Patricia Wilson in the matter of Debbra Eckhout versus the Township of Arcadia, Patricia Wilson, Greg Weisner, Janice McCraner, and Mike Cederholm. This is a matter currently pending in the Circuit Court for the County of Manistee, case number 18-16454-CZ. Today's date is Thursday, June 7, 2018, and the time is approximately 11:05 a.m. I am Susan Stiles, video operator and court reporter for Network Reporting. Counsel, if you would put your appearances on the record, I will then swear in the witness.
Frederick Signelson, Jesse Williams, Law and Advocacy Center, on behalf of the plaintiff.
Brad Werda, appearing on behalf of the defendants.
Ms. Wilson, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth?
Yes.
Ma'am, would you please state your full name for the record?
Patricia Wilson.
Would you spell your last name?
W-I-L-S-O-N.
Have you ever been deposed before?
No.
Counsel, do you believe your client needs to be informed of the deposition rules?
No, I wouldn't think so.
Okay. Just that being said, I'm just going to go over just a few things just to make sure that we're on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be asking you questions, and you understand that you're under oath.
Mm-hmm.
And you understand that we're being recorded, so when I ask a question, if you let me finish the question before you respond, and I'll wait to ask another question until after you're finished with your response.
Yes.
And it's better to say yes or no than We understand that?
Yes.
And obviously shaking the head, nodding, that doesn't help either. You understand that?
Yes.
And you understand that if you do not provide truthful testimony, that could subject you potentially to perjury charges, criminal charges in this case?
Yes.
Or in a separate case, I should say. And if you don't understand the question that I'm asking, please ask for clarification, and I will restate the question or try in a different form.
Okay.
And if you need a break, you'll let me know.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Wilson, what is your role at the Township of Arcadia?
Clerk.
And how long have you been the clerk?
Since August. I haven't done the count. August of 2017.
Thank you. And how did you become the clerk?
Appointment.
Appointment by who?
The board.
Okay. And does your role as clerk encompass any FOIA-related duties?
Yes.
And what are those duties?
I reply to FOIAs. I handle them.
Are you the FOIA coordinator?
Yes.
And did you receive training on how to respond to FOIA requests?
Self-training.
Self-trained. So that means that all of your training is exclusively, that was something that you sought exclusively on your own?
Correct.
And could you describe that self-training for me?
I went to the FOIA site, read the FOIA and the information, the act, and then looked at some cases that had been upheld or declined, and just familiarized myself with the act.
So you have not received any formal training with regards to the Freedom of Information Act?
No.
Do you believe that you are qualified to respond in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act?
Not solely.
How many FOIA requests have you responded to?
I wouldn't know the count off the top of my head, but quite a few.
Is it in the hundreds?
No.
Okay. Is it more than 50?
I would be guessing, but
Okay.
no.
All right. How many times since you've been the township clerk and the FOIA coordinator, has the township been sued for a violation of the Freedom of Information Act?
This is the only one to my knowledge.
How many times has the township had to deal with an appeal under the Freedom of Information Act?
To my knowledge, would be this one. I would have to look at my records to be certain.
So, am I incorrect when I state that there was an appeal with regards to a request by Larry Olson?
I'm not remembering it off the top of my head. It may be in my files. I would have to look.
You don't recall dealing with that at any special or any one of your meetings?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you agree that as a FOIA coordinator you have certain duties?
Absolutely.
Do you agree that you have to separate exempt from non-exempt material?
Correct.
Do you agree that you have to state the exemption and provide an explanation for why you're withholding that public record?
Correct.
Do you agree that you have to describe the public record that's being withheld?
Yes, in the answer, I think so, yeah.
Do you agree that you have to provide a requester under the Freedom of Information Act with certain information about their rights to appeal such a decision of denial?
Now I do, yes.
Now, are you aware of that your attorney in this lawsuit has provided a significant stack of documents to
Yes.
my client? Have you seen all of these documents?
Not everyone.
Not everyone. How were these documents generated?
From the individual people who were requested from them. We
Okay.
all were requested documents.
And so did you participate in the production of these documents subsequent to the filing of this lawsuit?
The ones that were under my name, yes.
Okay. And do you agree that this is a significant amount of documents?
Yes.
I don't know if you can see in here, and I'll pull these out in a minute, but do you agree that there is what looks like about a ream of paper there?
I think it was 801 pages when we
Okay.
ran it through the copy machine, to the extent that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yep.
So do you agree that it's approximately 801 pages?
I will agree.
Okay. Now, do you agree that you did not provide any of these documents in response to Ms. Eckhout's first FOIA request? And by first, I'm discussing the November 10th, 2017 FOIA request.
I do not know what every document is in there, so I won't say yes or no to that.
Well, let me ask you this, and we'll get to it in more detail, but isn't it true that you didn't provide a single document in response to the November 10th, 2017 FOIA
I don't
request?
remember the November 10th, 2017 off the top of my head.
So, if I told you that you didn't provide any documents in response to that, in your denial, would I
Okay.
be misspoken?
I'll
I
just
can't
object.
verify that.
Yeah, she already said she doesn't remember specifically, but I think the response was attached to your complaint, so I don't think there's any dispute about that.
You answered, or in your interrogatories, you responded that you as a FOIA coordinator respond in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act.
Correct.
Well, based on your statements, do you agree that you did not respond in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act to Ms. Eckhout's first FOIA request?
No.
You don't agree with that?
No, I responded to the best of my ability and knowledge.
Is there a difference between the best of your ability and knowledge and the requirements of the Freedom of Information Act?
I felt that I was within them at the time.
And that was based on your own self-learning?
No, that was in accordance with our township lawyer.
Okay, so are you saying that you followed 100% the advice of your township attorney in responding to the plaintiff's November 10th, 2017 FOIA request?
Correct.
He told you to write a one-page sentence in response to the denial.
I'm going to object on attorney-client privilege. I think the first question was fine. Did you follow your attorney's advice? But when you start asking about the specific advice, I think that's clearly protected by the attorney-client privilege. And so, I'm going to instruct her not to answer anything that would be covered by the privilege.
So you're instructing her not to answer that question?
Can you repeat the question again? I think you were asking for the specific statement from the attorney. If you were, then the answer is yes.
Is your testimony that your response to the November 10th, 2017 FOIA request, that response was wholly was wholly based on your attorney's advice?
It was directed by my attorney's advice.
And anything that you put in there was directed by your attorney?
I can't say definitively because I don't remember what the exact response was.
Okay.
And I would have to compare documents as to what the attorney sent me and what my exact response was.
All right. Well, we're going to back up just a little bit because this November 10th, 2017 FOIA request by Ms. Eckhout, that was not the first FOIA request you received from her, correct?
I don't remember. I would have to look at my files.
I'm handing you a document. It's been marked Plaintiff's Exhibit 1. Do you recognize that document?
I would say that I would, but I don't have absolute recollection of it.
So you do recognize it, but you don't.
You know what? I can't definitively say that I read that email because it was so long ago. I don't remember.
Well,
So I would I mean, I can't go back.
Ma'am, at the time that this email, what is the date of on that email?
This says Friday, September 22nd.
Were you the clerk of Township of Arcadia?
Yes, I was.
Were you the FOIA coordinator?
Yes, I was.
And is your email included on that document?
As a carbon copy, yes.
Okay, so when that email was sent to you,
Mm-hmm.
as a FOIA coordinator, you had certain duties to respond, correct?
This wasn't filed with me, it was filed to Craig. But if it had come to me as a FOIA request, then I would have treated it as a FOIA request.
So, does this document not say it's an official FOIA request?
Yes.
Okay, and it went to your email, whether it was
But
carbon
it was-
copy or not?
It was to Craig Rolfe.
Does it say anywhere in the body of the email that it was to Craig Wolf?
No, but the email is directed to Craig Rolfe, and I am CC'd on it.
So your testimony is that any FOIA request where you're simply CC'd, you're not going to respond to that?
It wasn't directed to me.
Did your township attorney forward that to you?
I would have to look. I
What
don't
if
have
I
a
told
clue.
you that he did?
Then he did.
Okay, so did you respond to that FOIA request?
I would have to look at my records.
Okay, and as of right now, you could not say whether you did or not.
No.
Okay, can you tell me what efforts you made to procure any of the documents requested in that request?
I would have referred it to Craig Rolfe and then dealt with the response.
Okay, so what if
I don't specifically remember, you know.
Ma'am, I'm handing you what is being marked as a deposition exhibit 2.
Where's the body of this?
This is do you recognize at least the emails associated with those?
The email addresses?
The
or-
email addresses?
Yeah, but there's nothing on these.
Well, those are documents that your attorney provided to me as part of discovery in this case. So they've been redacted because
Okay.
certain information was redacted. But do you now recall contacting the township attorney about Ms. Eckhout's September 22nd, 2017?
I'm sure I did.
request? You did. So you did seek advice from the attorney with regards to responding to that request.
Yes.
And so presumably you did respond to that request.
I'll object on foundation grounds. I'm not sure what you mean by presumably you did respond.
Did you respond to her FOIA request?
Again, I think that's been asked and answered. She doesn't really remember the FOIA request even and whether she responded to it.
These emails are blank. If there was a FOIA request, I referred it to the attorney.
And then he would have referred it back to you.
And we would have discussed it, yes.
So
And
it's-
he would have led me to what to answer.
Okay, so it's fair to say that pursuant to these emails, if you did respond, there would be a record in the possession of the township right now with your response to this FOIA request.
It should be in my email, yes.
Okay. So now, understanding that there is some document, what efforts did you make to obtain any documents in response to this FOIA?
This is the September 22, 2017
Yes,
one
sir.
again, that she doesn't remember.
You know what, I cannot tell you what steps I took. It was, September of last year. I referred it to the attorney, and I would have done as he asked me to do.
Okay. So again, all your actions with regards to the FOIA is you just do exactly as the attorney tells you.
He's much more knowledgeable than I am, so yes.
Okay. Let's talk about the November 10th Freedom of Information Act request. I'm handing you what's been marked as Deposition Exhibit 3. Do you recognize that? Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Looks that's okay. Thanks.
Yes, I think I remember seeing that, yes.
You do remember seeing that, and so that's on a public or a Freedom of Information Act request form,
Right.
And that would have gone to you.
And then it would have gone to the lawyer, yes.
Okay. And the lawyer is Craig Rolfe.
Yes,
Okay. And he was also the lawyer at that time.
yes.
Okay. So this document requests all communications via email, written, typed, document, or any other form of communication from Craig Rolfe to Township Supervisor, Clerk, Trustees from November 2016 to present.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now let's talk about what efforts you made to respond to that on your own with regards to the clerk aspect of that.
I would have waited for my attorney's advice, and then I would have responded correctly. I don't remember definitively what my steps were at this point, no.
Well,
I was just going to ask you to clarify. You mean when she initially responded as opposed to any kind of subsequent response?
yeah.
Okay.
So, did you search your emails?
I don't recall, but I have emails.
Do you know that the burden of justifying exemptions is on the person, is on the public body claiming the exemption?
Want to explain that to me? I don't understand what you're asking.
Do you understand that when you withhold documents, the burden is on the public body to justify why the documents are being withheld?
I didn't withhold by knowledge.
Okay, I'm going to hand you what's been marked as
Good. Yeah, the response.
Exhibit 4,
Yep.
which, do you recognize that document?
Yes.
Okay, what is that document?
It looks like a response stating that they were not disclosed due to attorney-client privilege.
Okay, and did you author that document?
Yes.
Okay, do you agree that that document does not describe or identify any of the documents that are being withheld?
Yes.
Do
It's
you
not,
agree?
the documents aren't on there.
Do you agree that it doesn't provide any non-exempt material?
Correct.
Okay, now tell me exactly what was the process for generating this email, for this response?
I would have forwarded it to the attorney, and I would have gotten a response. I did, and it was covered under attorney-client privilege, to my knowledge, so that's,
What efforts did you make to separate exempt from non-exempt material?
I just followed the attorney's advice.
What efforts did you make to identify with particularity the documents that you withheld?
I followed the attorney's advice.
Could you explain in detail what efforts you made to separate exempt from non-exempt material?
In detail, I referred it to the attorney, and I followed his response, and I responded as the attorney directed me.
Do you agree that you personally, in your, whether township or personal email, have documents that would be responsive to Ms. Eckhout's November 10th FOIA request?
I could not definitively say that without looking at my emails.
Well, did you look at your emails before responding to the FOIA request?
I don't remember whether I did or I did not at this point. I mean, I have my email and I have it filed, so my initial response is to go to the attorney because he is the educated one.
So is your testimony today that essentially when you respond to a FOIA, the only efforts that you make is you send an email to the attorney and he gives you some guidance and then you just write a denial?
I'll just
That's
object to
broad.
the form of the question.
Are you instructing her not to answer?
No?
Okay.
There's a lot of broad statements in there. I won't say always, I won't say ever, and I cannot remember exactly how I did this one step by step. But no, I don't everything blanket.
Are there emails in your possession that are responsive to that FOIA request?
I would have to look at my email.
Did you look at your email at that time?
I don't recall.
Did you seek to look at the emails from anyone else to try to compile the response to the FOIA?
I don't have access to anybody else's email.
Well, wouldn't your duty as a FOIA coordinator be to obtain all those documents from the other individuals that are named in the FOIA request?
If the attorney asked me to.
Is the attorney the FOIA coordinator or are you the FOIA coordinator?
The attorney assists me.
So who is the FOIA coordinator?
I am.
So you're the one that has the statutory duties, right?
Correct.
And you agree that this is a deficient response under the Act?
I can't say that it's deficient. It was what I thought was correct at the time.
At the time. Today, now you've gone back, you said you've done some research, you learned that certain things need to be included. Do you agree that this is not compliant with the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act?
I would have to look at everything. I can't make a blanket statement saying this is now deficient. When I answered this, I answered it to the best of my ability.
Ma'am, I'm not concerned with the best of your ability. I'm asking a very simple question. You are the FOIA coordinator, right?
Correct.
And you understand the Freedom of Information Act?
Object to the form of the question.
Do you understand the Freedom of Information Act?
I would say that nobody understands it completely.
Well, so
I've done research, and I asked for my attorney's assistance.
So you're the public official who's charged with responding to FOIA requests, and you don't understand the Freedom of Information Act?
You don't have to answer that question. That's just badgering. I mean, she's explained to you what process she did. We've subsequently provided you with a number of other documents. I'm not sure why we've got to keep going over and over this. I mean, she asked the attorney what to do. She took his advice, and then she followed it.
Are you instructing her not to answer that question?
The question that you just did, the badgering question, I am
What is the basis for that?
That you're simply badgering the witness.
I don't think that's the basis for her not to answer the question.
That you're badgering her?
Yeah, are you claiming a privilege? We can deal with that when we go to court, but either she's going to answer the question or she's not. But you can't claim an exemption just because you think the question is badgering.
Well, no, I mean, I can certainly instruct her not to answer if I think you're not asking the question for any purpose other than to badger the witness.
Well, I'm asking the question because she's a public official and she doesn't know what she's doing. So.
Okay, but you're specifically using the word understand, and she's trying to give you an answer that says, look, FOIA's complicated, nobody understands it completely, and then you're completely glossing over that and saying, are you saying as the FOIA coordinator you don't understand the FOIA? That's just an attempt to badger a witness.
So you're instructing her not to answer the question?
At this point in time, I don't recall what the question was, but I believe it was something to that effect.
So your testimony today is that the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, is hard to understand,
Yes.
and that you don't fully understand it.
No, I do not fully understand it.
And you have not obtained any formal training to help you to better understand it.
Not at this time.
And isn't it true that such training is available?
I haven't researched it.
Okay. So again, let's go back to your response to the November 10th, 2017 FOIA request. It's essentially a one-sentence response with a few semicolons. Is that accurate?
There's more than one sentence there, but it's short, yes.
Okay, well, so how many sentences are there?
Looks like 2 or 3. 2 with a comma.
Okay, did you consult the Act in response when you were generating the response to the November 10th, 2017 FOIA
I looked
request?
over the Act, and I looked over some cases where attorney-client privilege had been upheld and where it had not been upheld. I did that research after I referred it to Craig, and then I deferred to Craig's decision when he responded to me.
So in that research, you learned that you have to make efforts to separate exempt from non-exempt material, correct?
Correct.
And you agree that you did not make such efforts in responding to this FOIA request?
I don't know. I just followed the attorney's advice.
So the attorney instructed you to write this exact document?
No, not that exact document. I would, like I said, I would have to look at his response.
You didn't even attempt to gather any documents in response to this FOIA, did you?
I don't think that's correct,
Well, please.
but I'm trying to remember. This was September of last year, right? And I answered this to the best of my ability with the attorney's assistance. So I would have to look at my email to see what I generated after that FOIA. I know that I sent it to Craig, and I know that Craig's response led my response.
But you agree that this document doesn't name any sort of documents that are being withheld specifically and
Correct.
identify them? It doesn't identify them, right?
Correct.
It doesn't describe them,
Correct.
and it doesn't tell the requester.
No, I
What-
did
what-
not use the disclaimer, which I was not aware I needed to do at the time,
And by disclaimer, what are you talking about?
stating that they have appeal rights.
And you agree that that is a requirement under the Act,
Yes, it should have been on this document.
and you failed to do that.
Correct.
So you agree that this response does not comport with the Freedom of Information Act, correct?
With my knowledge now today, correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's where we're going. Does this document cite the specific exemption that you're claiming under the Act?
No.
Does it explain that exemption?
Well, it cites why attorney-client privilege, but it doesn't give any numbers or anything like that, and it just says attorney-client privilege.
So you agree that if you were going to respond to the same Freedom of Information Act request today, you would respond differently than you did at that time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So you agree that this is a violation of the Freedom of Information Act?
I don't have enough knowledge to say it's a violation.
Well, does it comply with the Freedom of Information Act?
You stated it didn't.
She's already answered about 5 questions admitting that, hasn't she, at this point? She admitted that the disclaimer, the appeal rights weren't on there. I mean, do we need to ask? I mean, she's admitted that it doesn't have what it needs to have on it. Do you need more than that?
Are you instructing her not to answer the question?
Not at all.
Say the question again.
So you agree that this does not comply with the Freedom of Information
No,
Act?
it does not comply. The disclaimer's not on there.
And not complying with the Freedom of Information Act would be a violation of the Freedom of Information Act, correct?
I couldn't answer that question.
Does responding in a non-compliant fashion to a request under the Freedom of Information Act subject your township to legal action by the requester?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know what repercussions there are.
So as the FOIA coordinator for the Township of Arcadia, you do not know what can happen if you don't respond properly to a FOIA request?
Well, I'm sure that there's repercussions, but at that time, no, I don't know what exactly the steps are.
So you don't have any way to dispute the fact that your failure to respond in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act has subjected the township to legal action by the plaintiff?
What do you mean I don't have a way to dispute?
Well, if you...
I've already admitted that this didn't have the correct stuff on it. So
you're saying at the time that you responded, you were not aware that a person could sue the township if you didn't respond properly?
I don't know that I had that knowledge, no.
So when you said that you read the act, had you actually read the act in its entirety?
I read the act.
Well, did you read the section that tells you about the punitive damages that can be?
I don't recall. That's why I use an attorney.
So my understanding is that essentially you're not so concerned about your duties because you can get the aid of an attorney?
Never said that. That I'm not concerned.
Well, do you understand your duties?
I sought the help of my attorney because I knew that I didn't obtain or have the complete knowledge to answer a FOIA. Therefore, I went to the attorney. So I feel like I did my due diligence and going to the attorney and saying, you know, this is what I've received, you know, because I don't have the knowledge.
Where in the Freedom of Information Act does it talk about due diligence?
I don't know.
Where in the Freedom of Information Act does it say that you can perform things to the best of your ability?
I wouldn't know that.
Does it say it in there?
I don't know. I didn't memorize it.
Clearly. So again, do you agree that this response, being deficient, has subjected the township to this lawsuit?
I don't know if that's the direct relation or not.
Okay, so at this point in time, your testimony is that you still don't really understand the Freedom of Information Act.
I didn't say that.
Well, right now, do you understand the recourse that an individual has with regards to a violation of the Freedom of Information Act?
I know that they can appeal to the board, and as obviously, since we're here, they can sue you.
You responded in your response to interrogatory number 4 that was submitted to your attorney that
This was the Township of Arcadia's answers. Is that what you're referring to? So when you say you mean the township responded to?
the township responded that you attempted to separate exempt from non-exempt materials in response to Ms. Eckhout's
Would you like
November
to
10th.
show her what you're referring to?
So you actually got to read it in conjunction with number 3.
Okay.
So what I've handed you is your the township's response to a set of interrogatories served on your attorney. I clarified the attorney for this action.
What is this referring to? Is this referring to when we produce the documents?
Yeah, I
That-
think the supplemental FOIA response is what's number
sup-
3, correct?
Well, we can deal with that.
Is that like the one that was numbered 1 through 23?
Maybe I'll read the question and see how we can go about it.
Yeah, because I
Sure.
don't understand what you're referring to.
This question is very clearly, it says, describe and identify with particularity each document that the Township of Arcadia, its supervisor, or its FOIA coordinator have withheld from plaintiff when responding to plaintiff's first FOIA request. So that is not addressing the supplemental response, that's addressing your response to the first FOIA request, which would be the November 10th as defined.
Right.
So,
Well, do you see the answer, though? It says, please see the affidavit regarding redactions
Yeah.
and documents with it.
which I don't think is responsive, but we'll deal with that later. But I'm asking about number 4, which says, for each document identified in interrogatory 3, which would be the documents that would potentially be responsive to the November 10th FOIA request, did you attempt to separate exempt from non-exempt information before denying plaintiff's FOIA request? So it's before denying, so it's not anything to do with after the lawsuit's filed. It's prior to denying it, prior to issuing this November 28th.
I would have,
I need to object a minute when you finished.
Okay, so prior to responding to this on November 28th, 2017, this question asks, did you attempt to separate exempt from non-exempt information before denying plaintiff's FOIA request? Your answer to the interrogatories, the township's answer was yes. My question to you is, explain to me what efforts you made to separate those.
I'm sorry. I'm going to object on form and foundation grounds. To the extent you understood, please feel free to answer.
I'm not sure what you're after. I conferred with Craig, and we had, I think we had some conversations. I don't know which one we had conversation on, and then I responded as I was directed.
So your under oath testimony today is that you cannot explain how you attempted to separate exempt from non-exempt information before denying the plaintiff's November 10th, 2017 Freedom of Information Act request.
Objection, form, and foundation. You can answer.
I worked with Craig.
I'm going to ask the question again because I would ask that you would please respond to my question. Is it true you cannot testify today to what your efforts were to separate exempt from non-exempt material?
I do not remember the specific process. I worked with Craig on these. I referred all of them to Craig, as I've previously stated, because I did not feel I had a scope of knowledge to properly answer.
So if I ask you, did you make efforts to separate exempt from non-exempt material?
I would say via the attorney.
But you have no idea you really don't even know what you're talking about.
Objection to the form of the question again. Do you really want to ask that question? You have no idea what you're talking about? You think that's an appropriate question?
I would hope that your client would just answer the question I've been asking 5 times in a row. So
I
I'll
think-
ask it again.
I think the question is extremely misleading, but did you separate exempt from non-exempt? She was clearly told that a request asking for all communications between an attorney and a client are privileged. She therefore didn't produce anything because there was nothing that was non-exempt. She's already admitted that she understands now that that might not be accurate in terms of the scope of the attorney-client privilege.
So are you testifying now to what her attorney told her? I'm not understanding. I'm just, the answer in the interrogatory is yes, so I'm trying to figure out if that answer is incorrect because she can't describe, she's the FOIA coordinator, she can't even explain what effort she made.
Okay. All right, let me just stop for a second because I feel like we're going to make this deposition go very long, and maybe there's not actually that much stuff to do. So I don't want to be in your way and be obstructive to your deposition. I do, however, find that a lot of your questions so far have been repetitive and are also misleading. For instance, the one that you're on right now, for each document identified in number 3 above, the answer to that is please see affidavit regarding redactions and documents withheld. Those are the documents identified in number 3 above. So when you try and say the question clearly is talking about way back when, I think the question is misleading and I think the question is wrong.
Well, Brad,
But again, I feel like I feel like we're spending too much time talking and not the witness, and so I'm going to try to back away from that. But I'd at the same time ask that you try and be a little bit more direct and less repetitive.
The responses to the interrogatories trying to couch them as a supplemental FOIA response is misleading because it doesn't respond to the discovery request and it doesn't describe and identify with particularity. I asked for the documents in the second one. So just saying, hey, here's a stack of documents, I'm not describing or identifying those documents is non-responsive. We will deal with that in a motion to compel, but I'm trying to ask your client a simple question. The township stated that they tried to separate exempt from non-exempt material. She's the FOIA coordinator. She's the one that worked with the attorney. I just want to know how. Explain to me how you did that. What were your attempts? If you're writing in a sworn answer to an interrogatory that you made attempts, what are the attempts? Because how can you say yes if you don't know what the attempts were?
All I would be doing is repeating what I said earlier, so I won't do that.
So what is your question?
For the documents that I described, the documents that would be
What
responsive.
documents are you describing?
Well,
Let's be specific.
Well, let me ask you, FOIA coordinator, what documents did you discover that were responsive to this FOIA request, November 10th, 2017?
I was told that they are attorney-client privilege, and I did not.
So is your answer that without actually looking at all the documents, you were told that they were attorney-client privilege, and therefore you didn't feel the need to actually go through those documents?
I won't answer what Craig did because Craig did work on it.
So again, your testimony is you can't testify about any of your efforts to separate the exempt from non-exempt materials, correct?
I don't think I said that. I don't understand. What do you mean I'm testifying that I can't testify?
Well, you're saying that you don't know what you did.
Well, I don't remember this specifically, to be honest with you, without my files and my email to make the whole picture available. I know I worked with Craig, and Craig and I, we decided that was attorney-client privilege.
So you went through individual documents together and you
No.
reviewed, and so okay, now we're getting somewhere. So you didn't take each email and say, this email, look at this email, what do you think about this email? No, that's attorney-client privilege, let's move on. You didn't go through that process, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you didn't discuss specific documents or correspondence that might be responsive and then say, we're not going to do these.
We did discuss, but I don't remember how specific they were at this time.
But you can't think of a single specific document that you identified and then made that determination on?
I don't know if I read him some of my emails or not. I don't remember. I'm sorry.
How much time did you spend responding to this FOIA request?
I wouldn't know. I don't have a clue.
Well, was it a half hour, an hour?
I have no clue.
How much time did you spend in generating the so-called supplemental FOIA response that you're
My portion, I don't remember. You know,
Okay.
I got a request and I answered it.
Have you not?
I don't punch a clock and I don't time things, so I don't know.
Well, don't you bill people for responding to FOIA requests?
If I have to,
Okay.
if I have a response.
But your testimony right now is that you didn't punch a clock, so you didn't record any of your time that was spent preparing responses to either this original one or the supplemental request.
I would have to look at my records to see.
Okay. And you agree that responding to the supplement, or providing these documents under discovery, that was quite recent in time, right?
Yes, that
Okay.
was, well, not quite recent. It was this spring, wasn't it?
Do you agree that you spent more time working on the so-called supplemental FOIA response than you did on your denial?
What's the so-called supplemental?
This huge pile of documents that we've talked about that your attorney
I
sent
don't
over?
recall how much time I spent on this, so I can't tell you whether or not they're comparable.
Okay. But you agree that some of these documents, at least the ones that you provided to your attorney, would have been responsive to this FOIA request?
Now, with the knowledge, yes.
Okay, so if they're responsive now, then they would have also been responsive at the time, right?
I'm assuming that, yes, they should have been disclosed at the time. I was in error.
How did you contact with regards to, we talked about the September 22nd, 2017 FOIA request. With regards to the November 10th, 2017 FOIA request, Exhibit 3, how did you communicate with the township attorney?
I probably scanned it in an email. I would have to look.
Okay. Do you think that all of the communications with regards to how to respond to that would have been via email?
For the most part, we don't talk on the phone much, but I won't say that I never talked on the phone with them.
Okay. So you initially emailed him,
Mm-hmm.
and then he would have responded to you.
Mm-hmm.
When you were responding to this November 10th, 2017 FOIA request from the treasurer, how would you characterize your attitude toward the treasurer at that time?
I don't have any idea how I felt towards the treasurer at that time.
Well, is it fair to say that there's some strain on the relationship between certain members of the board and the treasurer
I
right
don't
now?
feel I have a relationship with her other than business.
Okay. Do you recall the treasurer requesting certain documents back in August of 2017, just via an email?
I started in August, and I don't remember off the top of my head, no.
Handing what's been marked as Deposition Exhibit 5. Do you recognize that email?
No,
So your testimony is that you never received that email?
not to my knowledge.
Okay. Let's talk about Ms. Eckhout's December 14th Freedom of Information Act request. Do you recall receiving such a request?
I don't know. I would have to look at it. I don't know them by date.
Well, you realize that there's a lawsuit going on right now, right?
Yes.
And you realize that that lawsuit is because of the way that the township responded to certain FOIA requests?
I think that's the subject of it.
So you haven't reviewed any of your responses in preparation for your testimony today?
Reviewed any of her responses?
Or you haven't reviewed any of those pertinent documents, the FOIA requests or your denials or anything like that in preparation for today?
Reviewed them?
Yeah.
Not specifically.
Okay. So I'm handing you.
It's just the FOIA request.
Yeah, this is a copy. This is not the actual original one, but it's been marked deposition exhibit number 6.
Mhm.
Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Okay. And you recall receiving that
Yes.
request? And that's a fairly detailed request, correct?
Yes.
It goes through a lot of different things.
Correct.
And now let's talk about when you received that. What was your procedure there?
I forwarded it to Craig.
Okay. And then I don't want to know what he told you to do, but then he told you to do something,
Yes.
and then
He gave me guidance.
and
Yep.
you acted in accordance with that guidance.
Correct.
Now, what efforts did you make what documents did you identify in the possession of the township that were responsive to this FOIA?
Well, a lot of these ask for emails, which I don't have access to. So I would have let Craig know that. I don't know specifically. But I only have access to emails that were generated after my coming on the board. So I do not have access to the server or the email prior to that. So I would assume that I would have let Craig know that.
Do you agree that you would be the person responsible for obtaining all those records, regardless of whether or not they had been
Yes.
generated prior?
Yes, and I don't know if I sent out a request or not. I would have to look back.
Okay, and do you agree that there are certain stuff requested in this extensive FOIA that probably were responsive that wouldn't be exempt from disclosure?
Like I said, I would have deferred to what the attorney, I allowed him to guide me as to what I should respond to and what I should not respond to. And I followed his guidance.
And do you recall that in your response, you cited an exemption that has to deal with law enforcement, ongoing law enforcement investigation?
Yes.
Now, could you explain the basis for citing that exemption?
To my knowledge, the investigation hadn't been closed. I didn't have any documentation, and so I assumed that it would still be under a privilege.
And I'm sorry for not clarifying. When you're talking about investigation not being closed, which investigation are you discussing?
The Marina one is the only one I know of.
So your testimony is that in December of 2014, or of December 14th, 2017, the Marina fraud investigation was not closed.
I can't honestly answer you that. I believe, at the time I believed that it wasn't completely closed.
Isn't it true that the Manistee County prosecutor declined to authorize charges on that prior to you receiving that request?
You know what? I read the report and they did, but there was talk that it was deferred back to the township. There was a lot of talk within the public, and it was a very pertinent. They wanted us to go to a federal level. There was requests out there. So as far as I was concerned, it was still alive and well.
Do you realize that when you claim the exemption for ongoing law enforcement investigation, there are certain requirements that go under there? There's only
I
specific
am now,
instances?
yes.
Okay, do you agree that the documents requested in that would not be covered by those exemptions?
I can't say that everyone, because I don't have access to every single one. I will say that there was probably stuff that should have been generated and it was not.
Okay, and it's fair to say that Craig Rolfe's purpose in dealing with the law enforcement investigation with regard to the Marina fraud was certainly not to aid law enforcement, but to protect the interest of the township or other individuals.
I couldn't answer what Craig's intent was.
Well, could you tell me how disclosing emails between the township attorney and Michigan State Police regarding a FOIA would interfere with law enforcement proceedings?
If it were an active case, those would be considered confidential and part of the case. And until the case was completely closed, they would not be disclosed. Now, mind you, we're talking about December, and like I said, it was still very much well and alive, and we had citizens demanding that it be sent to a federal level. So
when you say confidential, what do you mean confidential? Because whose confidence?
I would assume it would be between the police and the attorney, or
So you believe that there's privileged communications between police and an attorney that's representing someone who's being investigated?
I would think if it were part of the investigation, it would be confidential.
Wouldn't the police be on one side and then the attorney be on another side?
I don't know that. Depends on what the attorney's for.
So Craig Rolfe, was he working with the police in this investigation?
I was not there, I'm not privy, I was not part of it.
Okay,
So I have no knowledge of the actual time. I was not even involved in it. So I can't speak to what Craig's part was in it.
do you agree that emails from Craig Rolfe to the Manistee Police Department, Manistee Sheriff's Office, or the Michigan State Police would not be protected by the attorney-client privilege?
I'm not aware, I'm not knowledgeable enough to answer that.
Okay, so when you cited this exception, you didn't really know what it meant.
It was based on what the attorney told me. And like I said, I did read about what I could find on the FOIA in regard to this. So, but I followed Craig's advice.
And you agree that at this point you realize that your response was deficient?
Yes.
Okay. And you agree that that response did not identify with particularity the documents that were being withheld?
Correct.
And you agree that that response, again, did not include the statutorily required language regarding a person's
Correct.
right of appeal? If you just let me finish the question so it doesn't get muddled on the... For responding to this December 14th Freedom of Information Act request, did you go through specific documents and decide whether or not to withhold those?
I don't remember definitively, but I believe that there were some that we were able to.
With showing her the response, maybe speed
Yeah,
that along.
I don't know if I have it for some reason, but maybe I can ask a question that would help. You did provide one document in response to that Freedom of Information Act request, Carl Heiser's
I was thinking that, yeah, Carl Heiser's contract.
Okay.
I was just making sure it was in this one because I had it in my possession, and you know.
So let me ask you about what exemption would you claim for all emails, communications, documents relating to the Township Board resolution to admonish the treasurer?
I don't think I even had anything on those whatsoever.
Your testimony is that at the time that you received
I don't even I don't remember what my response was, and I don't remember. All communication related to the township resolution to admonish the treasurer. I don't even recall it.
So do you agree that those communications would not be covered by this law enforcement exemption?
Well, it's very broad. All communications and emails. It doesn't say who they are between. So I should have asked for more clarification because all communication. It doesn't say who it's between. To me,
So is that
it's very, very broad. So I wouldn't even know where to start to obtain.
So is that a reason for not disclosing documents?
You have to be specific about what documents you're requesting also.
So your testimony is that you don't believe that it's specific enough to say Township Board's direction to Attorney Rolfe to work on admonishment of the treasurer? That's
Well,
pretty
if they were
specific.
if they were between Craig and the township, again, it would be attorney-client privilege.
Well, they say related to, so that's broader than just to and from Craig, right?
I don't know.
So again, you didn't really take this FOIA request seriously.
Objection to the form of the question. You can answer.
I took every FOIA seriously.
Okay, so what documents did you identify in responding to this FOIA that you decided to withhold?
I don't recall
How much time did you...
specifically,
how
and
much
I
time
don't
did you spend?
recall how much time. I know I spent time.
So you agree, though, that the two claimed exemptions are not sufficient to withhold all the documents that would be responsive to this FOIA request?
Say that again?
The two exemptions that you claimed, one being the ongoing law enforcement investigation, and then the attorney-client privilege is not sufficient to withhold all the documents. that you
Correct at
withheld.
this point. Yeah.
Okay, so again, so this, your response, and I'm sorry I don't have it in front of you, but it sounds like you remember it fairly well. That response does not comply with the Freedom of Information Act requirements. Okay. One of the township's responses to an interrogatory was that the statutorily required language was inadvertently omitted.
Okay, explain that to me.
The statutory language that's required to give the requester notice of what they can do to appeal a decision.
Yes, that was omitted. I did not realize it had to be on the response.
Okay, so it's
And
not.
I was since educated to that.
So twice it was omitted,
Yes,
at least twice.
probably more than that because I wasn't aware that it was required.
Presumably, every FOIA request that you responded to from September or from when you took office in August until some point after this lawsuit was filed, you did not include that statutory language, right?
I would have to go back and look where I don't know how many I denied. I don't know.
Well, let me ask you. You're saying that you didn't know that that was supposed to be part of it.
No, I didn't.
So then, anything that you would have responded to, if you didn't know that was supposed to be part of it, you would have not have included that language on any denial that you had issued.
Correct, because I didn't know
Okay.
it was required.
So there's significant amounts so every denial that you issued would have been a violation of the Freedom of Information Act up until you were re-educated.
I guess so.
Okay. Are there additional emails between yourself and the supervisor or yourself and other board members that are responsive to the plaintiff's first or second FOIA requests that have not been disclosed?
Not to my knowledge.
Additional to what's been
Yeah.
disclosed now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge.
Have you gone through each email that in your own personal email or township email that you thought would be responsive to it?
When I was asked to, yes, I did.
Okay. But you didn't do that prior to being asked to by Mr. Weirda?
I don't remember if I looked through them or not when I was working with Craig.
It's fair to say that you didn't do it as in-depth as you did this time.
I don't think that's fair to say. I'm saying I don't recall.
Okay. And let's talk about you put together an affidavit with regards to the discovery responses. And you did not put together an affidavit when you made your denial of the plaintiff's first request, right?
Did I know?
Okay. And you did not put together such affidavit when you did it in denial of the plaintiff's second FOIA request, correct?
The only affidavits I did were after the lawsuit and with the lawyers.
And that affidavit outlines all the documents that you previously failed to outline. That would be
To my knowledge.
And again, that was something that you should have done the first time
Sure.
and the second time?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you sort of blow off the responses to these FOIA requests because you were sick of dealing with the treasurer?
No.
Okay. Are you sick of dealing with the treasurer?
Sick of dealing with?
The treasurer?
You'll have to be more specific with what you're asking, dealing with. I don't deal with her.
Well, you're being hostile towards me, so I'm wondering if maybe your hostility towards me has to do with your hostility towards Ms. Eckhout.
I didn't
Hold
feel
on,
I
hold
was
on a
being.
minute. Just
yeah.
let me put an objection on. I'm going to object to the form and the foundation of the question. Again, just if we can keep it professional. I haven't seen any hostility from her to you. Certainly none that exceeds any hostility coming from you to her. So if we could just maybe stay away from those kind of characterizations.
No, I realize I'm the younger lawyer. You're lecturing me. I'm just asking a question. So are you instructing her not to answer the question?
No, I didn't instruct her not to answer the question.
I don't feel I've been hostile. I don't have hostile feelings towards you or the treasurer.
You don't have any hostile feelings towards the treasurer?
No, I do not.
Okay. I want to talk about going into this issue of expenses.
Okay.
And I want to talk about QuickBooks. Do you agree that the treasurer should use QuickBooks?
Yes.
And do you use QuickBooks?
Yes.
And do you agree that the township has to pay for the treasurer's use of QuickBooks?
We have a multi-user contract.
Okay, so that means that you would that she has a password to access QuickBooks right now?
She has a username and password, yes.
And that your testimony today is that you have not locked her out of that using that QuickBooks?
Nope.
So if I were to bring in a computer expert that would say differently, he would be lying.
Objection to the form of the question. Again, you can answer.
I don't know if he would be lying, but her name and her password's there. I don't know what her password is.
Is it true that Ms. Eckhout has requested reimbursement for purchasing QuickBooks?
I would have to see. I don't have copies of all her reimbursements with me.
Do you agree that you have not reimbursed the treasurer for any of her requested expenses since April of 2017?
I don't feel there was board approval for a purchase of QuickBooks. We own 2 copies.
Isn't it true that you don't need board approval for purchases under $500?
Objection to the form of the question, just in terms of being an incomplete hypothetical.
So,
Are you instructing her not to answer the question?
No, if I'm instructing her not to answer a question, I'll make it very clear that I'm instructing her not to answer a question.
what is your question?
My question is, isn't it true that the board does not require previous approval to pay claims under $500?
Correct.
Same
Okay.
objection.
So, so you're saying that the treasurer needed board approval to get QuickBooks, but I'm handing you what's been marked as deposition exhibit number 7. It's 2 documents.
Give me just a minute. It's the first time I've seen this
Yeah.
document.
And you'll get all this next week.
Thanks.
Number one, I don't remember ever getting this. I remember the discussion about it at the board, but I don't remember having this put on my desk.
So is your testimony that you didn't receive it, or that you just don't remember whether you received it?
I would say that I don't recall receiving it. I have no knowledge of receiving it.
Okay, so this being a request for reimbursement for $210.94 for QuickBooks for the treasurer's record keeping, your testimony is that you have never...
I don't remember seeing it.
Okay.
I
so-
would have to look at my files. A lot I returned to her for clarification, and I didn't keep in my files.
Well, I want to talk about some of these issues of clarification. Up until very recently, well, let me ask you this. Do you get reimbursed for mileage?
To education or meetings directly related to my position.
Okay. And you went to a training seminar in Cadillac sometime in the fall of 2017?
MTA, yeah.
And the treasurer went to that as well, right? Mm-hmm. And you were reimbursed for going to that? Mm-hmm. And you did not reimburse the treasurer for that, correct?
I don't recall.
Well, did you or did you not?
I would have to look at my records.
Okay. So
I don't memorize every reimbursement.
Okay, well, oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
You recognize that document?
I can't say that I recognize this document because I don't specifically, if this document was presented to me in this form, I would have reimbursed her for it. I do recall that there were some that the original reimbursement forms, like this is what I staple with a copy of the check, and then I file in my files so I can pull them because sometimes people ask for reimbursement, so I always verify with what I've already reimbursed. And I had some originals that were not returned, and so I did ask her to look for originals so that I could be sure that this were not reimbursed. But like I said, I would have to look at my documents, at my payroll to see. But this is a reimbursable.
Okay, so if for some reason this is just a glitch and you were represented with this tomorrow, this would be something that you would reimburse?
Yes.
Okay.
Why don't we send her with a copy with it right back today, and maybe we can get a reimbursement.
Well, there's a bunch of them, but
Okay, terrific.
So, all right. Well, let's talk about.
Do you want to keep that? Is marked as an exhibit? Do we want to keep that out of your
Mm-hmm.
file just to make sure?
Thanks.
Yep.
So many papers.
No, I hear you.
Handing you what's been marked as deposition exhibit number 9. Oh, I'm sorry,
I'll
Brad.
just look over your shoulder.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, let's go ahead. We'll do it at the same time. See if we can keep moving along.
So this is over $500. I would have asked her for board approval on this. And to be quite honest with you, I never recall seeing anything like this come across my desk.
So if it was
If
presented to you
today,
tomorrow,
I would say it needs board approval because it is over $500.
okay. But is there any reason why the board wouldn't reimburse
I can't
them?
answer for the board,
Okay.
but it just needs to be brought to the board.
Isn't it true that there at several board meetings, or at least one board meeting, let me rephrase that. Isn't it true that in at least one board meeting, the treasurer has requested reimbursement for his expenses and the board refused? No one brought it to a second?
I don't specifically recall that, no. That's very broad expenses. It would have to be which expense.
So, I'm handing you a document marked deposition exhibit number 10. Those are some minutes from one of your meetings, is that correct?
This says motion by treasurer to pay all treasurer reimbursement from April 27 to present, and it lacks support.
Right.
But yes, that's extremely broad, and I would never agree to something that said all,
Okay.
because you have to present the correct documentation.
So is your testimony that what the treasurer would have to do is individually motion for each payment?
Yes.
Okay. And is your under oath testimony that this lack of support is not because of a dispute between the ongoing dispute between the treasurer and the township board?
I don't know of an ongoing dispute.
Your testimony today that you don't believe that there's an ongoing dispute between the treasurer and the township board?
I'm part of the township board, and I don't have an ongoing dispute. I pay things based on what's presented to me.
You have not been instructed by Janice McCraner or any other individuals to not pay Deborah
Absolutely
Eckhout?
not.
Isn't it true that your township has engaged in not only a forensic auditor but also the Manistee Sheriff's Department trying to investigate the treasurer?
Correct.
And so your testimony today is that there's not an ongoing dispute between the treasurer and the township board?
I can't answer for all the township board members, but as far as I'm concerned, I do not have a dispute with her, no. If she presented me with the correct documentation and it was a payable reimbursement, I would reimburse.
I'm running out of exhibit stickers here, but so I'm handing you what's been marked as deposition exhibit number 11.
You have copies of all this, right?
This would require a Google map. We like to have Google map from township to the bank so that I can have the mileage on record. I do require that. And I can't speak definitively to this one, but that's what, if this crossed my desk today, I would return it and ask for the Google map. But she has since provided me with a hard copy of mileage, and so I paid her April one because it was complete and I had that mileage record to all the banks on file. I have since found that it is questionable and needs to be investigated that if mileage to and from the bank is even a reimbursable expense.
Right, and that's something that you just came up with recently, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
But this would have been sent back, if it came across my desk, it would have just asked for the Google Maps.
so would your position be that since you just discovered it, and isn't it, it's fair to say that the pattern and practice has been that the treasurer gets reimbursed for her mileage to and from the bank?
It was my knowledge when I came on the board that that she did.
And that would be the
The only
That would
reason
be-
I would deny it would be for lack of documentation, and I do recall stating that original documents went missing, and I pull all reimbursements and compare them before I pay reimbursements, and I do that on everybody, because people can forget what they've asked for.
So your testimony today is that if tomorrow you were given all these reimbursement forms, and I'm not going to introduce all of these, but the reimbursement forms with regards to mileage, and they had attached one Google Maps printout for each trip. They don't have to be for
No.
just one time, right? That would go a long way towards you reimbursing these.
I would not now, no, because I've since found the verbiage in the general policy and I've asked Deborah to produce me with the documentation stating that mileage to and from the bank is not included in her salary, because according to our general policy manual, the only reimbursement to boardship members outside of their salary is mileage to and from meetings and education directly related to their position. So she asked me, and she told me that it was nonsense, and I said, well, please provide me with the documentation showing where it's listed that you get mileage to and from the bank.
Don't you agree that it would be sort of absurd to enforce that retroactively? Like, don't you think that maybe from the time that you decided to have that be the rule, if the pattern and practice, that you would maybe start going forward, you wouldn't reimburse, but you would reimburse the mileage up until now when you informed her?
I don't feel that say that again, because you had a real interesting way of saying that.
My question to you is, up until very recently as what, May?
It was April. It was
April
after
okay.
I paid her April mileage, and it was after when we did the payroll changes, and I was in the general policy manual that I discovered this, yes.
Don't you agree that up until April, the treasurer was operating under the assumption that she would be reimbursed for mileage, right? And
I'm sure she was,
And that's
yeah.
been the pattern and practice, right?
I think that I'm the only, I don't know. I cannot go back all the way. The only mileage I reimbursed was in April.
So it might be fair to not pay her going forward if that's the issue, but not paying her retroactively, that wouldn't really be very fair, would it?
Nobody else has been reimbursed, and I will think the whole thing will have to be looked at individually and discussed on the board and find out if it's reimbursable, then yes, she should be reimbursed for it, but I will need to see the documentation before I'm going to reimburse.
Your testimony is that nobody's been reimbursed for mileage.
No, that is not what I'm saying. I feel that there might be one incident that the treasurer has been in April. There might be an incident that the supervisor has, and there might be an incident, I can't remember if I have. So what I would do going forward is we would have a board discussion, decide if this was reimbursable, and if not, then we have to decide if we're going to recoup that payment or we're going to pay it.
Isn't it true that all this is just related to the ongoing issues with the treasurer?
Pardon me?
Isn't it true that you and the township board are finding ways to make the treasurer's
No.
job difficult? That's
No.
your under oath testimony?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, what about the fire safe?
Yes, the fire safe.
Yeah, the board voted to approve the
Yes,
purchase of
they
the
did.
fire safe.
And
they
the
voted-
auditors did not like the receipt, and I specifically told Debbie, and I won't remember the date, it was after a board meeting, her deputy was present. I said, please provide a receipt with the proper information, whether it was new or used, what you paid with, and I would reimburse it. And the
Patty.
deputy was witness to that.
If you can just wait for him to ask his
Oh,
question. I know
sorry.
sometimes you can kind of anticipate what the question's going to be, but just wait for the question.
Sorry.
Nope, you're doing fine.
handing you a document that's been marked deposition exhibit number 13. It's,
So do we have a 12?
oh, did we not? Oh, I'm sorry. We did not have. I have a 12 as well here. 12 and 13. That's what I'm handing you. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
That's number 13. It's number 12. Do you recognize number 12?
Yes.
And what are those documents?
These are payment to election workers.
Okay. And are those mileage reimbursements?
Yes, for election inspectors.
Okay. Now, is it true that there's no Google Maps attached to those?
No, I don't have Google Maps to them.
Okay, but you reimbursed them anyway?
Correct.
And that was from May of 2018?
Yes.
Okay, so
This is a separate situation. They don't fall under the township employee rules.
Okay, so this is just your own rule about the Google Maps. You apply it when you want to,
No,
and you don't apply
I
it.
expect, I do it from every board member. I do it for myself, I do it for the supervisor and everybody.
I'm
And
sorry.
I may have had the Google Maps and didn't attach them to the final.
Okay, so now you may have. So you
you
may
know.
have had the. So you have the Google Maps.
Just let her answer.
I do not have the Google Maps in my possession.
Okay, and you don't know whether you had them. But there's different policy for them,
Yes, they are a completely different situation.
and there's a different policy for the treasurer.
No,
Okay. But you reimburse yourself for the trip to Cadillac and not the treasurer.
as I said. Whatever trip that was, if it were over the thing, or if as I said, if this was presented in this way to me, I would reimburse it.
Okay.
So
And that was Exhibit 8. Is that what we're
that
referring
is
to?
Exhibit 8.
Okay.
And I would also then pull everything from her file and make sure it wasn't previously paid.
Do you pull everything from everybody's file every time you
Yes, I
make a
do. I have a
reimbursement?
separate file.
Counsel, I have several other of these documents, but I think maybe in the interest of time, I'll just give them to you, and then we can try to deal with it that way. Just so we're clear for the record, your policy would be that if it's under $500 and it has the Google Maps attached and the proper documentation and has not been previously reimbursed, you would reimburse it if
Correct.
it's related to the duties.
Other than the mileage issue that was brought up with the recent policy?
Yeah. And again, that recent policy, so do you know that the board has a duty to audit and pay reasonable expenses that they deem reasonable when an elected official submits those to the board?
Review, yes, they review them, but it's according to the policy of the township.
Do you agree that they have a duty to audit or to review those documents?
Just object to the extent it calls for a legal conclusion. You can answer if you can.
What documents are you asking me to review?
Do you know that there's a statute that says that if a township elected official has incurred expenses in the performance of their duties, that the township board has at least a duty to review those and then reimburse those that they deem reasonable?
Yeah,
Objection.
You agree that that's true?
that they need to be
Objection.
reviewed.
Yeah. And so the township board needs to review them, not just the clerk, right?
If I can just have a continuing objection.
I don't know that when they come to me, I write, if she had an objection to what I did, then I would say, yes, it needs to go to the board. But I would base my payment off of the general policy.
Do you believe that your policy trumps the state law? Your local policies?
Trumps?
Yeah, do you know what that word means?
Yes, I understand what you're saying, but trumps, I believe that they have to be in accordance with, but I believe that our general policy is our township law, yeah.
So do you believe that, so township laws are subordinate to state laws, is that right?
Not, no, I say that if we have a right as a township to write legislation for legislation's not the right word, to write policies as long as they're in accordance with the state laws. There are areas where the state laws allow us to further delineate and describe and itemize what's going to be done to further expound upon the law. And I feel that those, in that case, what we expound and what we pass as a township board and put in our general policies, yes, would be what we would follow.
But those can't contradict the state law, is that right?
Again, I would refer to a lawyer before I ever asked, or before I answered that question, but to my knowledge, that our general policy book was built with a lawyer in accordance, and so that's kind of what I try to follow.
Who do you think should shoulder the blame for the deficiencies in the FOIA responses? Is it
Shoulder the blame?
yeah? Is it your failure, or is it the township attorney's failure?
I don't know whether number one, I didn't realize there was a failure, and I think that that's being rectified, but I don't know if there's blame. I did what I felt was correct at the time. I can't speak to what Craig did.
That really wasn't the question. I'll ask it again. You have decided, you've agreed that they're not compliant with the Freedom of Information Act, right?
Correct.
Neither the response to the November 10th FOIA request or the December 14th FOIA request.
Correct.
Are they not compliant because you didn't understand the act at the time, or are they not compliant because your attorney advised you in a manner and you followed your attorney's advice?
Well, that would be twofold. I didn't put the disclaimer on. I don't know that Craig did tell me to, but that was a lack of knowledge on my part, so I think that would be my fault. And basically, I mean, as a FOIA coordinator, it probably just falls all on my shoulders because that's, end of ownership.
We have a few more moments here, but what is your understanding of how the attorney-client privilege operates with regards to your communications?
Again, I'm just going to object in terms of it calls for a legal conclusion, but you can answer it to the extent you can.
From a personal
As a FOIA coordinator.
As a FOIA coordinator, I would say that it's much more convoluted than I thought at first. I thought it was more black and white.
Do you think that any communication between the township attorney and any township employee would be protected by the attorney-client privilege?
Like I've said, I think that it's more like there's sentences that can be obviously sent and not sent that I didn't, I was thinking of it as a whole. So there are minutia that I didn't consider.
Who does the township attorney represent?
Well, the township.
And when you say the township, does he represent the township board or the township as a whole, in your understanding?
I would say it would be the township board. But
Again, I have a continuing objection
Yeah.
to all these legal
Yeah.
questions.
I don't know the exact scope, but when I say Arcadia Township, I think that the problems come from the people to the board, and that he should work in the best interest of the town and the board. That's my personal opinion, but I don't know what the legal scope is. But
So if an individual was committing a crime against the township board, and that person was an employee or a board official, would the attorney represent the board or that
I don't know.
individual?
That would have to be decided by those that know. I don't know.
But you agree that that would be a consideration in responding to the first and second FOIA requests that we've discussed today?
What would be a consideration?
Well, you cited the attorney-client privilege in both denials, right?
Right.
And there was documents being requested which were communications between various individuals, some of them being township board members, some of them being state police, some of them being sheriff's department, some of them being the harbor master and his wife. Would you agree that that would be I'm not saying you don't have to tell me what you think would be the right answer, but you agree that this discussion, these questions I'm asking you about the attorney-client privilege would be relevant to that inquiry and how to respond to the FOIA request?
They would be relevant, yes.
Because clearly, if you claim the exemption for attorney-client privilege, there has to actually be the correct attorney-client privilege.
I would assume so, yes.
And you agree that at that time and now you don't really feel comfortable answering exactly the parameters of the attorney-client privilege?
No.
Yeah, I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
I don't have any questions.
Thanks.
We are going off the record at the conclusion of the video deposition of Patricia Wilson, and the time is 12:30 p.m.